and welcome. My name's Angie Holden and I'm the blogger behind The Country Chic Cottage. The number one question I hear people saying when it comes to sublimation is, how do I make my colors pop? How do I make my projects more vibrant? How do I make the colors really look great on any blank that I choose? So today we're going to talk about 10 reasons why your sublimation projects might not be as vibrant as you want them to be. Now there are a variety of reasons, and some of these might be in combination with each other, so you might find that a couple of things you're doing might contribute to your colors looking dull when you actually sublimate them. And the reasons are going to be, some are going to be very simple and some are going to be more complicated and take you some more time. So the number one thing with sublimation is patience. So please have your patience here, but I know that you can get it right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is images. Number one is your image resolution. So what they recommend is 300 dpi, which is a very technical term, but 300 dpi for the resolution of your image. So let's talk about how you can go wrong with this. So the images taken on most standard cell phones are fine for sublimation. However, let's just do a however here. So sometimes when you have pictures on your phone, you have them backing up to a cloud. And sometimes, regardless of whether you set it that way or not, they back up to the cloud at a lower resolution. Then when you go to pull those off of the cloud and print them for sublimation, you can actually have a low resolution image that is not going to sublimate well. So you always want to check the resolution of your image and make sure it's as high as possible. When you're talking about old photographs that you taken with a digital camera several years ago, photographs that you're scanning in that may be very old, the resolution of those probably is not going to be as good as some new photography. That means the colors might not be as accurate and everything might not be as vibrant, so you may get some dull images with some of those older photographs. And it's just a factor of the pixelation of the image and the fact that the resolution is just not there. There's not a ton you can do currently, so I've seen some very cool things that are in the works with a lot of places where they're going to be able to up the resolution of photographs, and hopefully within the next few years, maybe sooner than that, that becomes a reality where we can just do that for free and up the resolution of those before we print them. But for now, I don't have a good solution for that. I haven't seen an excellent solution for increasing the resolution of your photographs. So just be aware that if you use a low resolution photograph or image, or if you are using some old photography, it is probably at a low resolution, and those could factor in to the look of your final product. And before we leave this number one here, I do want to talk about pulling images off of a website. So when you Google something and you want to put it onto your mug or your tumbler, first of all, do be aware of all copyright issues because images you find on the internet are copyrighted. But number two, when you pull those off, they are probably going to be at a lower resolution than are for print quality. Just as a general rule, images on a website are not at a high enough quality. So you do want to go to that original source to make sure that you have the copyright, number one, and number two, to make sure that you can download a high resolution version to make your projects really pop and really as vibrant as possible. So while we're on the subject of images, let's talk about the contrast of images. So images you take with your phone are great. They're great for sublimation, but sometimes the contrast just isn't there. Perhaps you had like too much light, it was a little washed out, you were taking it in really bright sunlight, so you just have like a really light image. There's not a ton of contrast in the image. Sometimes going to an image editing program and increasing the contrast can help the look of your final sublimation project. You can play around with this a little bit, but if you have an image and you just think the contrast is not there, even if it's like a really dark image, you might want to lighten that up, increase the contrast a little bit. Photo editing software at this point is generally free. You can probably just do it on your phone with the phone app, or even not in app. Like on my iPhone, I can just click the photograph and start playing with some of the settings, like the brightness, the contrast, that type of thing. So go ahead and play with those settings for photographs that you think, if they're on your phone screen, the colors don't pop, they're not going to pop once you print them on your sublimation printer and press them. So keep that in mind when you're choosing the photographs for your sublimation projects. Perhaps you want to choose different ones or edit those slightly before you print them. All right, number 3 is kind of a mistake I see people making. I see people saying that their print is dull when they print it on their sublimation printer. When you print something on your sublimation printer, it is going to look dull. It's just a fact. So the printout itself is going to look very dull, and the colors might even look drastically different than what is actually the photograph looks like or the graphic looks like. The only way to actually tell what is going to happen is the next tip. That is to press that to 100% polyester fabric cloth. So you can buy 100% polyester fabric at your local craft store. You can get 100% polyester like sheets or curtains or something like that at, like your local dollar store. Use that scrap fabric to press the image. Then you can see what the colors and what the vibrance actually looks like. So those tips are kind of together, but never judge the vibrance of the print right off of your sublimation printer, and only judge that vibrance when pressed to 100% polyester fabric to get a really good idea of actually what it's going to look like. So now let's talk about the enemy of sublimation, and that is moisture. Moisture and humidity are definitely the enemy of sublimation in general. It can make your sublimation projects just look like a total failure. Get like dots or areas of the sublimation print that look very faded and dull. If you see that happening to you, it most likely is moisture or humidity in your space. Controlling the humidity in your space is a great way to help eliminate some of those issues. And then the second way is to pre-press as anything that you can. So fabric items, you can definitely pre-press those. A lot of sublimation blanks you can pre-press. Like if they're flat, you can put them in your heat press, pre-press them. Even some sublimation blanks like hardboard coasters or things like that, I hover my heat press over the top of them for a while before I press them, just to kind of heat them up and make any moisture evaporate before I actually sublimate on them. I find that that really helps with my sublimation projects and getting the best results possible the first time and not wasting sublimation blanks. So be sure to check out moisture in your sublimation and if that's an issue. Now, if you are watching this video, I'm trying to give you an example, but if you just can't see it, you just don't understand what moisture is going to do to your sublimation print, go back to that where we're talking about testing on 100% polyester fabric. You can test things like this too. So get that polyester fabric damp and then sublimate on it and see just what moisture can do to a sublimation print. Once you see it for yourself after you press, you'll recognize it immediately when it happens to your own project and know that you need to either control the moisture or pre-press in those cases. So let's talk Epson printer settings. So this is for like an Epson Eco Tank. Generally what I recommend is that you set it to a matte paper setting, high quality, high speed off, mirror on. And then you can do any color correction that you would like, either manually or with an ICC profile. So that's generally what I recommend. You can see some differences with different print settings, especially on different types of materials. So here's one example. So both of these are a matte paper setting, and I've just pressed these to 100% polyester fabric. Both of these are a matte paper setting, and in both cases I have high speed off. However, this one is high quality, this one is standard quality. And while the difference is not significant, and I press these the exact same time, temperature, pressure, that type of thing. While the difference is not significant, I definitely think you can tell a difference between those two. And frankly, on polyester fabric, I kind of like the standard quality better. So what's happening here is with the high quality, you're getting more ink laid down on the paper. Standard quality, you're getting less ink. So depending on the surface you're pressing on, you might find things that work with both of these. So you might find things that you really like the high quality with and things that you really like the standard quality with. You can also change the paper type itself. So glossy versus matte versus a plain paper setting will all lay down different amounts of ink. So you might find that you need to tweak your paper and print settings a little bit for each surface that you sublimate on with that Epson Eco Tank to get the results that you're looking for. Now, what if you have a Sawgrass sublimation printer? Doesn't it do all of that for you? Yes, kind of. So what happens when you're printing with a Sawgrass printer is you pick the surface you're going to put it on, and it lays down the right amount of ink for each of those surfaces. However, there is another option that a lot of people overlook. So it is in your color management, And there's a couple different options here that you need to take a look at. One is photographic and the other is called vivid or vibrant. The difference between those two is that you should choose the photographic for any photographs. So something that has a skin tone, that type of thing. Landscapes might be good with this, just to get your colors to look correct. Other than that, you want to pick that vivid or vibrant setting. And let's take a look at why. These are pressed to 100% polyester fabric, both using the same time, temperature, and pressure. However, this one was printed with the photographic setting, and this one was printed with the vivid setting. And hopefully you can tell, but the vivid setting really does pop off of the fabric a lot more. And I can really tell it in this area here. The blue and white is just much more vibrant, and there's a ton more contrast in this area than on this one with the photographic setting. So I would say experiment with that a little bit, but don't forget about that setting, because that could be the key to making the color on your projects really pop if you have a Sawgrass printer. So that was the printer settings for the Epson EcoTank and the Sawgrass. For the Epson F170, there's not a ton you can do. So there's only two options. There is the textile and rigid surfaces. So that's really all you can do with the F170. So I didn't really print and test anything because there's not a ton to change there. I find that I can't really alter that printer a ton, whereas with the Sawgrass, I have the two options I can alternate between. And then with the Epson EcoTank, I have a ton of options actually that I could kind of play with and alter. So I didn't find a ton of things on the F170 that I found that I could alter that really made a difference. The time, temperature, and pressure that you press at can have a huge factor on your color. So I would always start with whatever your blank says. So the time, temperature, and pressure that it says for your blank wherever you purchase the blank itself. However, you can do some experimentation. So this is just a 100% piece of polyester fabric. And this is 385 degrees for 50 seconds. This is generally what I like to make my colors really pop out and really stand out on fabric surfaces. So for comparison purposes, I did 385 for 25 seconds. All of these are the exact same pressure. So this would replicate something that wasn't hot enough. And you can really see a difference in these colors. So if I fold over these reds and compare just the reds, these are very, very dull and just don't pop off the fabric, whereas these look really great. Now what happens if you overheat something? So I did this one for 400 degrees at 120 seconds, so I overheated it. What starts to happen, and you might not be able to tell on camera, however, this overheated one is very blurry. Nothing is sharp, so it's not very sharp. It doesn't stand off of the fabric. So if I fold these over, we're gonna look maybe at the greens and blues here. So if you look at these blues and greens compared to one another, just as a comparison, you can see that these are very dull looking, whereas these really look great on the fabric. So your time, temperature, and even pressure can have an effect, and you can have too little or too much of any of those things, and it can make your colors not as vibrant and they don't pop as much. So when we were talking about printer settings, I mentioned color correction a little bit when we were talking about the Epson EcoTank. So with the Epson EcoTank, when you convert that for sublimation, you do need to think about color correction, either manual color correction or ICC profiles. That can have a huge difference on your colors in general, like the colors coming out like your pinks not looking orange, that type of thing, but also the way the colors pop off of the surface. It can also make a difference there as well. So definitely look into color correction. I have a whole other video on that. I'm not going to go into the full thing here, and I will drop a link to that video in the description below this one. So when we are talking about colors not being vibrant, another mistake I see people making is not pressing to 100% polyester fabric. So they press to a 50% polyester, 50% cotton shirt, and they expect the colors to be bright and vibrant. And quite frankly, they are just not going to be that. So when you press to a 50% polyester, 50% cotton shirt, only 50% of the ink is actually sublimating, because sublimation needs polyester to bond. So that means you will get a dull result regardless of all these other things. So you can do all the other things on the list right and put something on a 50% polyester fabric shirt, and it's still not going to be vibrant and bright. So keep that in mind when you pick out your blanks for sublimation. You do want to try to do 100% polyester if at all possible, because that will give you the best results. And then when we're talking about those blanks and which ones to pick, let's talk about the color of the blank as well. So yes, you could get a 100% polyester shirt and it might be, say, blue, but when you sublimate on it, why does the sublimation just seem to blend in? Well, sublimation ink is translucent. That means you can see through it once it's applied to the surface. So for optimal colors, you want to pick a white sublimation blank. That will give you the optimal colors when it comes to sublimation. If you pick something like the blue fabric to sublimate on, you are going to see that blue through the sublimation ink, and it is not going to look how you intended it to look, number one, and probably isn't going to pop off the surface. So I see a lot of people putting sublimation on a gray shirt and wondering why it doesn't pop off. It is because that gray is showing through, altering the color and making it darker than it should be. Now the same thing goes for glass sublimation blanks. So anything clear or frosted, it's not a white surface. So you can see through it basically, and the sublimation itself is going to look more dull than it would on a white sublimation blank. The white is what makes it kind of pop off. So when you sublimate on something that's clear or frosted and not white, it's definitely not going to look as vibrant to your eye and pop off of the blank as much to your eye as it would if it was white. So holding up something that was white and been sublimated next to something that is like a clear or a frosted glass and has been sublimated, putting those two side by side, and you will really tell a difference. So be sure to consider the color of your sublimation blank when you're choosing something to sublimate on, and keep in mind what that's going to do to your final product. So that was 10 things technically, but last thing I wanted to mention, your brand of sublimation ink. I definitely think that this could factor in. So when I use my Sawgrass printer, I use Sawgrass Original inks, and I don't have any problems. When I use my Epson F170, I use Epson Original inks. Again, I haven't had any problems with those. Now, when you convert an Epson EcoTank for sublimation, you don't have a name brand sublimation ink to put in it. I personally use the Hippo brand of ink, and I haven't had any troubles with it, so I've not tried another brand of ink. I do think that some brands of sublimation ink are going to perform better than others, so do your research before converting your Epson EcoTank printer, and I would just make sure that you're putting in an ink that comes highly recommended. There are several on the market that I've seen that are highly recommended. Probably any of those would be fine, but I would make sure that you're not choosing a really off-brand ink on Amazon that no one's heard of, no one's used. That might cause you problems. There are plenty of inexpensive options out there, even on Amazon, that are perfectly fine. Tons of people have used and tons of people have had success with. So I would definitely choose one of those if you're converting one of those printers. So that's it. That's my list of making sure that your sublimation is not dull, is as vibrant as possible, and really pops off of whatever you're putting it on. Hopefully this helps you in your quest to get a more vibrant sublimation print on your blank. If you're having issues, I would just go through this list. So kind of like start at the top, check off each item. Are you doing what I said on each item? And some of those items might require some experimentation. So we talked a little bit about the printer settings. You might play around with your printer settings. Grab, a color chart, or I have these flowers in a free bundle, and I'll drop those in the description below this video. They're really great for testing things because they have a ton of different colors. So I'll have those in like a free bundle. You can print the flowers off, press them to 100% polyester fabric, just like I've done. That's how I find my best settings, is frankly experimentation. Experimentation on time, temperature, pressure. Experimentations on a variety of settings. That's how I have done it, and I've experimented a ton. Now I know exactly, basically, what I should print my sublimation print at for a wide variety of surfaces. And so I just print and press now, and I don't have to do all of this experimentation every time. So hopefully this helps you. If it does, give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions about anything we've covered, drop down in the comment section, ask away. If you haven't already, head on over to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. We have videos just like this one every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss any of those. So thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.